Well, hello, how are you doing? Thanks again for subscribing to my e-newsletter. And I'm here today with Matt Gray, my Chief of Sustainability. We just completed our summit for 2019, for Sustainable Cleveland 2019. We'll go over that, and we'll talk about our commitment to the canopy with the trees, and then later on, in another segment, we'll be talking about our kennel and adoption program.
It's 2019, the 2019 and Sustainable Cleveland 2019.
Right.
What was special about this year for you?
Well, as you know, we started this in 2009, and the goal was how do we transform our economy into a sustainable economy by the year 2019. And that was the concept then, and we went through a process with Dr. David Cooperrider, the appreciative inquiry process. And at the end of the summit, it was a 2.5-day summit, we declared that we would do a summit every year until 2019. And so the significance of this year is that it was the final year of that particular designation of Sustainable Cleveland 2019. That's how it got its name. As you know, the question now is what do we do next? And what have we accomplished over that period of time? And then what do we do next?
So take us back to 2009, when it started and where Cleveland was, and, then 10 years later, kind of compare and contrast a little bit.
Well, we had, then we were in the midst of a recession. So the thing about a sustainable economy wasn't necessarily one about a green economy, but more about an economy that was sustainable and would not have the ebbs and flows of a traditional marketplace. And we wanted to kind of balance that out. It became very apparent in our first summit that in order to accomplish that, we had to incorporate sustainable practices because it was about an economy that had this manic depressive nature that was all about the exploitation of people, resources, and situations for the sake of greed and profits and things like that. And we wanted to, it became, as I say, very clear that in order for that to be more sustainable, have a more even year to year to year kind of thing, still be very profitable, the sustainable practices had to be included, and which resulted in environmental approach towards being more friendly to the environment, but also using sustainable and environmental practices in business practices that would make it profitable, such as zero waste, converting to LEDs, do all those things that demonstrated that being sustainable and being environmentally friendly was not in opposition to being profitable. And I think we've accomplished that to a large degree.
That's what I think about too, is the back then it seemed like there were certainly people who've been involved in sustainability for a long time, but there wasn't that structure to bring everyone together to kind of move forward. And so back then it was these loose ideas, and now I feel like we have an organization essentially who's owning almost every sustainability topic, including the city.
Well, the format really allowed for, as you mentioned, the different points of view and the different advocacy groups to come together under one umbrella to create a cohesive kind of policy moving forward. And it's flexible enough to allow each of those interests to be able to do its own thing, but also come in under a common agenda of moving the city forward in terms of sustainable practices for not only for business, but primarily it evolved into sustainable practices that were both friendly to the environment and to business bottom line profit, and to demonstrate that they weren't mortal enemies. That before, people would say, if you talk about sustainable things, particularly when we get to trees. People believe that was anti-business.
Mm-hmm.
Now they don't think that way. They think more of a way that says, we can actually have both and have a better outcome, which is really the purpose of the summit.
Yeah, so I think trees is a good example. I mean, we work on a lot of things, right? Energy, transportation, clean
Climate
water.
control, carbon footprint, clean water, creating a healthy environment with green neighborhoods and alternative modes of producing energy and transportation. All these things come in together, but trees has been over the last few years a very hot topic.
Yeah, and I think it's a good example in terms of trees and the initiative and kind of where we were. So maybe I'll tee it up a little bit. And thinking back then in 2009, when I came in 2011, I mean, trees they've always been an issue, but it wasn't top of mind in terms of our priorities, I would say, in sustainability. But then we had our summits, and as the years went on, trees became more priority for residents and businesses, to the point where a working group formed out of a summit. Then a coalition formed of over 40 organizations. The city then helped lead a Cleveland tree plan to kind of pull all those ideas together into one document. And now we've been implementing that plan for a few years now. And then at the summit, we sort of shared at least a milestone there. I don't know if you can talk more about that and how that means.
Well, as you look context, as you know, as you said, it was always there, but not reached this crescendo kind of thing. Well, but this carbon footprint, global warming, and the importance and significance in trees to help mitigate, at minimum mitigate, and in some ways help reverse that, is really something that people recognize now. And as you said, you led the whole initiative around having us pay a significant focus on that, where at the summit we announced that we will be spending up to $1 million a year, hopefully over the next 5 to 10 years hopefully, to help create a better canopy of trees, and not just, we'll do it in Cleveland, but this really is a greater Cleveland initiative.
Right, I mean, really, every city in Northeast Ohio has been losing canopy to some degree, and I think it's also a good example where the public-private partnership is critical. The city can do a lot, but there's no way we can do it all, and in fact, most trees are on private land.
That's right. Well, like for us, if we take down a tree, we replace a tree. If we do it on a tree lawn, if it's in the public right-of-way, or if it's in a playground or a park, we tend to replace those. It may not be as mature a tree, but we tend to replace it. But if you say, for instance, you had 5 acres or 10 acres of wooded area because it became overgrown because of the vacant property, vacant lots and things, if a developer came, they would just remove all of that. So you'd have no trees. And whatever they replaced it with would be more like shrubbery than trees. So this is the partnership trying to have a policy where the private sector buys in, not one. I find that enforcing something on somebody, even if they agree with you, they'll resent it. So it's always better for people to buy in and just comply because they know it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. So I guess pivoting a little bit towards the future, obviously we've made a lot of progress over 10 years. Just curious, how do you see this moving forward? Clearly, the work needs to continue, and there's a lot of work to do. But just curious on kind of where you're.
Well, as you know, there's a lot of discussion. What do we do now after the 10-11 year period of sustainable Cleveland, 2019 from 09 to 19? What is the next step? What do we do? Just not to have the gathering of people would, I think, be detrimental to the overall momentum. farming that responsibility and that leadership and vision out to a group that may have an advocacy point of view, I think would not get us the buy-in of a whole group, because people tend to advocate their own stuff, and other people, as you know, in the environmental movement groups, they don't always get along. And so you find that sometimes you find that clash. We were a great intermediary. We were a great convener because we had no agenda per se, other than providing the platform and the format to bring together ideas and to come up with solutions, which is really based in that appreciative inquiry process that Dr. David Cooperrider introduced us to.
And it's clear that, I mean, as you pointed out, engagement is critical. It's going to remain critical, and so we're going to be coming out with a survey for the larger Sustainable Cleveland community based on the summit and what we heard, and really want to hear from people on where their priorities are. You know, when we think of engagement, as we've refined this over the years, it's certainly the summit is critical. There's that one time a year to bring people together. There's also the just direct one-on-one people engagement in the neighborhoods, which we've done more and more of. And then there's the topical areas where we engage on. So if we're crafting a plan to get to 100% renewable, let's bring all those stakeholders together. If we're looking at electric vehicles and how do we move forward as a community, let's bring those stakeholders together. So those are the kind of three areas I think we're going to want feedback from the community on.
Well, what you're talking about is how do we focus energy and efforts and identify a few areas that we focus on and get something done there, then move to something else. Not ignoring other things, because what we may pick for that particular year or so something may rise up that overtakes that. And then, but you have to be flexible enough to adjust. But your concept of really saying we're going to look at electric vehicles, or we're going to look at the group that was formed around the buildings downtown.
Oh, the Cleveland 2030 district and energy efficiency.
Energy efficiency, you know, how is that going? Those kind of things like that. So after we get the opinion of others back, then we'll have to make a decision, and we'll move forward.
Okay. Sounds great. Well, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on to our kennel and the dogs that are at the kennel and the efforts that we are making to improve the conditions out there. As you know, we've spent, I think, close to $7 million on a new kennel. The ribbon cutting was this year. It is a state-of-the-art in terms of the facility, and we have some very good people who run and operate the kennel, as well as a large number of volunteers. Without those volunteers, we would have a more difficult time, not only in terms of making it a quality space for the dogs that are there, but also in terms of adoption and getting dogs to individuals or families who are matched with the dogs. They're very good at that. Is my understanding that we are at capacity because we tend to keep the animals longer than normal rather than euthanize them. And as for that purpose, we are at capacity, and so there are at least 100 dogs that are available for adoption, and we're lowering the fees to encourage people to come, visit the kennel, look at the dogs, develop some kind of connection with anyone that you can develop a connection with, and we would ask you to adopt them and give them a home. There's also neutering, spading there, putting chips into dogs in order to be able to find them if they're lost, and other kind of services that you can get for your pet your dog, your animal, if and not have to have them at the kennel per se, but there are services that we also provide.